Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
On today's episode, March the 18th, we turn to Numbers chapter 16, and we encounter what is really a sad story in the biblical narrative. It's a story of rebellion. It's a story of wrath. It's a story of judgment. And it's important for us as we encounter this type of story, this instance, for us to remember the overall theme of the Bible. Remember that God is forming in His people a heart that is ready to obey Him. And time again, as we see these Israelites who have experienced the salvation of the Lord, who have seen Him do mighty things with an outstretched arm, whom the Lord has demonstrated Himself, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity, we see these people forgetting this about this God. And so today, that's our place in the story. And it's important for us to keep the whole in mind. Otherwise, some philosopher or one who doesn't believe, one who knows just a little bit about the Bible, they pick and choose, they cherry pick instances, and they point to the fact, see, look, God here is a moral monster. That's sort of the language that they use with stories like this. And the instances when people come to us like that, just remember, they don't know the Bible. We have to read the Bible in its whole. We have to remember that God is forming in His people a heart that's ready to worship. And of course, the ultimate way that God is going to form in His people a heart ready to worship is through Jesus, who pays the penalty for sin. And then He sends the Holy Spirit, as we're going to see in the text today, sends the Holy Spirit to baptize with fire. But let's get there. Let's start. Let's start in Numbers chapter 16. We have the rebellion of Korah here. It says, Now Korah the son of Izhar, son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the son of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, son of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. So here we have the architect for this rebellion. He's getting a coalition together of those who are well-known. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron and said to them, You have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? And so Korah here is really a false teacher in the midst of the people of Israel. He is a false teacher who brings false hope. And then the trial is going to be set. God's going to see who is it that is, God's going to demonstrate who is it that He is with. And the glory of the Lord, in verse 19, appeared to all the congregation. And the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, in verse 21, Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. And look at the reaction of Moses and Aaron. And they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits and of all flesh, shall one man sin, and you be angry with all the congregation? There again, they know the Lord. The sons of Korah say that they do, but they really don't. Moses and Aaron know the Lord, and they know that He is a God abounding in steadfast love. But they also know that He's a God of holiness, who can't put up with sin and iniquity. Look at verse 23. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Say to the congregation, Get away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Moses said in verse 28, Hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and it has not been of my own accord. This is important. Moses is saying, I'm not doing things on my own. I'm receiving a word from the Lord, and thus executing this. If these men die, as all men die, or if they visited by the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belong to them, they shall go down alive in Sheol. Then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord. And that's exactly what happened. The ground opens up and consumes them, and then those who run away, fire falls down from heaven and consumes them. And look at what happens in verse 41. On the next day, all the congregation and the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, You've killed the people of the Lord. So even after the rebellion is over, there's residual effects of the rebellion. And so God sends a plague. But notice again, as God is sending a plague amongst the people, who is it that makes atonement? It's Moses and it's Aaron. Those who are motivated by what they know. They know glory, and they also have experienced grace. And so they go to make atonement for the people, and the plague was stopped. Now, that brings us into Luke chapter 3, verses 1 through 22, where we have to move quickly. But we see in verse 10 that all of this is that John is saying to tax collectors and soldiers, all of this is a heart-forming exercise. And then look at what happens, especially in light of what we just read in Numbers. We have John answered them, saying, I baptize you with water, but he who is mightier than I is coming, the strap of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fork is in his hand to clear his threshing floor, to gather the wheat into his barn, but the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire. Now, God is holy, and he sends his Spirit to burn us with fire. You know that day that the Spirit came, the Holy Spirit came from above as a cloven tongue of fire above the heads of the people. And that fire above the head consumed the hearts of the people. And one day that same fire will consume us either from the outside in or from the inside out. And the difference is hope in Jesus Christ. But look at Psalm 71 as we close. In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness deliver me and rescue me. Be to me a rock of refuge. Verse 5. For you, O Lord, are my hope, my trust, O Lord, from my youth. This is the God in whom we hope in. This is the God to whom we run. This God who is holy, and this God who saves.